So, welcome back. And in this video, I was required to do a series of the introduction of different cases of the pawn formation, in which you can help to develop a clear understanding of what kind of pawns you have in different games. So today I'm gonna talk about five to six about pawn formation to give you a basic understanding of the benefits or the weakness that this kind of formation of pawns can bring you in this whole chess game. So the first pawn that I'm gonna introduce, which is very common in chess playing, that is called the pawn chain. What is a pawn chain? So a pawn chain is kind of like, let's do an example. So e4 and e5, and knight to f3 and knight to c6, and bishop to c4 and knight to f6. And then if white moves to pawn to d3, then we will see that c2, d3, and e4 are three connected pawns, which we call the pawn chain, which means the first pawn is protected by the second one, and the second one is protected by the third one. So this kind of structure is very aggressive and very protective to white, and be very aggressive to the black. Sorry. So within that, it's very hard for black to take this pawn without using pawn exchange, right? Because this pawn can just take it directly if the knight just take it, and the pawn will just take it. So let's see. But the problem of this pawn is that the last pawn is not protected by the pawns. So if the queen does not exist here, then the pawns can be attacked if the knight gonna go to b4, for instance, so the c2 pawn is just being attacked, right? So the next pawn formation I'm gonna introduce is a double pawn. What is a double pawn? Double pawn is very common also in Italian opening, as for instance, if the bishop want to go to c5 and then the bishop go to e3, and during this exchange the white will have a double pawn. Double pawn is like in the same file there are two pawns, and with no square between them. So in this case, these two pawns are called double pawns. So generally speaking, double pawns has more weakness than the advantages they can bring to the whole chess game, because without taking a look at this pawn, d3 pawn, you will see that these two pawns are not related to each other, because in the chess rules, the pawns should be protected if and only if they are in the besides lines, in the besides files. For instance, the D pawns can protect E pawns, but the E pawns cannot protect E pawns. So these two pawns are being isolated and could not be protected to each other. So these pawns are very easy to attack because you will need the knight to protect it, but maybe the black will over attack to this single position and make the white to be collapsed. So this pawn right there is very significant to the whole chess game. And let's see about the another situation that double pawns are. So double pawns. Okay, that one we'll discuss later. But now I'm just saying how to solve this problem. We can see if this exchange and then back castle. Well, and then the white will play knight to d3 and rook to e8. And then if you want to go to d4 to exchange these pawns, then the double pawns will be solved. But in this case, these pawns are not protected very well, so we will leave this a little bit later. For instance, we just castle at first, and then d6, and when the rook to e1, for instance, like this, it will be safe to do this. But in the most cases, the black will not accept this because this is not good for black. Okay, so this is the second case of the pawns. And then I will talk about the isolated pawns. Isolated pawns is basically the same as the the double pawns because they have more weakness than their advantages. So we have a position setup maybe. Right, we have a position setup. For instance, we have a pawn here and a pawn here. The kings should be set. Alright. So in this case, in general, these two a2 pawn and the c4 pawns are isolated, which means they are not correlated to each other. And only if and only if there is something like a back piece right there, and you just take them, and then these pawns are we call the chain pawns, pawn chains. So that is the isolated pawns. So another pawn formation is like this. I think I can do a new game. This is the queen side opening. It's like this. Knight to f6, which is like the symmetry for the which is a symmetry of the king side, so it doesn't matter. It's like this and going that and going this. So knight to c6, and this time we will see that if the pawn takes d5 and pawn takes d5 takes it and bishop to c5, we'll see that these pawns are in the middle of the these pawns are in the middle of the chess game, right? And being isolated to the two files away from this pawn right there. So this is called a isolated pawn, or we can say the position pawn. So the position pawn is like it has a hold a direct position in the center of the chessboard and control everything that in the center. And also, besides it, there is no pawns that can help to protect it. All right. So this is a I think the fourth case, right? So to make a deeper understanding, we can see the fifth case, that is called a better understanding what is a position pawn is. Okay. That is a pass pawn. What is a pass pawn? PASS, which means they can go through to the other side of the chessboard. So let's see if there is this pawn does not exist, then the d5 pawn is called a pass pawn, which means they can go to the line rank 1 to be other pieces, for example queen, etc. So this is the position pawn, which has a very aggressive to the to the opponents. So I think you have the basic understanding of what kind of the pawns can be. Oh, one more thing is that let's see a position setup. Clear the board, and I think you might have something. You have a little bit understanding what this looks like. So a little bit exaggerated, but so this is definitely a close to situation of a pawn chain. So there is only one open file. But this is a very interesting example. We can see that no other pieces can be interacted or get through. Only if you, for example, with the bishop here and you just take it, then a pawn will take it, and you have something can go through it. But this is but you just sacrifice one piece, so maybe not be worth of it. So this is how the pawn chain is, how the pawn chain reacts to the opponents or in the chessboard. I think those are the 5 general cases and the very special or typical cases in the chess for the pawns. So I hope you guys can understand what I just said or just taught you. And if you have any questions, just leave a comment below. And so thanks for watching, and hope to see you in the next video.